Tishani is a poet, novelist, and essayist whose work explores the body, gender, violence, sexuality, and power. For 15 years now, she was a dancer with Chandralekha, performing around the world, and to her, the body remains central to her writing as a site of both struggle and transformation. Her debut collection, Countries of the Body, won the Forward Prize for Best First Collection in 2006, and her later poetry collections include Girls Are Coming Out of the Woods, shortlisted for the Ted Hughes Award, and A God at the Door, shortlisted for the Forward Prize for Poetry. Her novels, The Pleasure Seekers and Small Days and Nights, have received several major nominations. She's a Fellow of the Royal Society of Literature and an Associate Professor of Literature and Creative Writing at NYU Abu Dhabi. Egrets, While War is Tishani Doshi's fifth collection of poetry. The poems explore the connections between environmental loss, ancestral memory, aging, and the devastations of war. Birds appear throughout the collection, from mythic birds of the Ramayana to city pigeons and wild peacocks. They become symbols, messengers and witnesses to war, extinction, and exile. At its heart, Egrets While War is a meditation on survival, of species, of history, and of the human heart. The performance combining film and movement, in which a solo performer on stage interacts with a film sequence of three masked women. Drawing on her poetry collection, the piece moves between images of birds, war, childhood, and ancestry. This will be followed with a conversation with Priyanjali Basu, who is our very own Chennai person and is the CEO of Ashwita's, Director of Contemporary Now, and the co-founder of the Chennai Photo Biennale. Can I please request you to take a moment to switch off your cell phones and not take any flash photography or video recording of the performance. And with that, please join me in applauding Tishani's Egrets While War.
Hi, I would like to say hi to you first, Tishani. It's been really long. I haven't seen you in a while, and I think everyone here was absolutely mesmerized looking at you and watching you perform. And I want to bring back one memory I have. The first time I actually saw you perform was 14 years ago at Spaces. I didn't know who you were, and I was about to get married and move to Chennai. And my in-laws said, you have to go to Spaces and you have to see this performance. And that's the first time I saw you perform Sharira. And I had no idea about Chandralekha. I had no idea about the history of her performance. And when I saw you perform, I had never seen a performance like that in my life. So I do want to tell you that it was an absolute pleasure to have seen you perform that many years ago, because I have never seen you perform that piece ever again. So it was an absolute pleasure to see you perform today. But I've seen you from a performer to a teacher to a writer, and now you're writing these beautiful books and amazing, amazing, amazing text. And they're not poetry for me. I think they're more short stories. And I wanted you to tell me how it's been a journey from being a dancer to coming to writing this book and coming back to Chennai. Too many questions. We'll start with the first one. How has it been to come back? Yeah, okay. Hi everyone. Thank you for coming, and thank you for doing this. I think, I'm basically a poet first, and I was very happy to perform some of these poems here because this city, which I still call Madras, as you can tell, and sometimes also referred to as Chennai, but Chennai has not worked its way into a poem actually. It's always Madras. Yes. It's been always poetry as the base, and in fact I'm not a dancer, and Chandra always called me a non-dancer, so I don't still hesitate to call myself a dancer because I didn't study, I didn't have a classical training as such. But I think I feel that way about everything that I do. When I got a teaching job, I was not an academic. I still don't think of myself as an academic, even though I'm a professor. And so I think being a kind of a novice or a beginner or a student is a good place for me to be always figuring out what it is I'm doing. It also means that I can experiment and play with form, with the different things that I've been exposed to. So for instance, this collection felt very weighty to me because coming out of the pandemic, I had this idea that maybe other people did too, that we would be going into something joyful perhaps, having experienced this existential threat of wipeout and having survived, that we would create a more beautiful world. And then I found writing these poems that actually things got more and more depressing and difficult and conflicts and everything was just the climate economically. It was not going to that sense of wonder of being alive, and I think so the poems came from that, and why I wanted to experiment with image in terms of this kind of piece. I think again it's partly because of having done different forms and the image being very interesting to me as a writer. A lot of the poems start with one image, it sits inside and then suddenly comes out in the form of a poem. But also in dance, you're working with certain geometry, a certain shape. And I think we live in an age of images now. I'm a writer and I believe in the word and the text, no matter how, how much it's suffering, because words and language, they don't always mean what they say. But I think that we live with images, so I thought how to bring in these images in a different way. And so that's why there was this kind of textural thing happening. In fact, it's beautiful because I think one of the things, I haven't finished reading the book, but when I started reading it and you performed some of the pieces, and I think this idea of nostalgia, and it wasn't just about Madras. I think even for me, when I was reading some of them, I realized that there is a certain way some of us grew up. I don't think it exists anymore. And one of this was this time when I was thinking about where to take my son on a holiday. Growing up, summer holidays was always with grandparents. It didn't matter where you were, whether you were in a village, whether you were in a city, it was always about going to grandparents. And there's this whole thing with going to grandparents, the house, the picking of mangoes, making pickle. I don't think any of that exists anymore. So I think one of the things that came out for me in this book is a lot of nostalgia. And a lot of things that you mentioned. I think the video and the directorial debut. Is this your first directorial?
Kind of a little bit.
Yeah. Why didn't you tell us a little about that? Because it's a completely different genre, and I think you've shot it well. Even the way you've spoken about nostalgia and how you displayed it. How different was it, and why did you think it would be great to bring two mediums, which is your writing and directing this? Because it's a video piece.
Yeah, I basically, it's an odd thing. You get to sort of middle age, which is, that's where I'm at, and the great middle age, and you're in a very curious place because you're looking towards the future that is shrinking and coming towards you very, very fast, and then suddenly, weirdly, I find childhood much closer. I don't think I used to think about childhood so much. I mean, it's always a very potent thing for a writer.
It's moving away, the migration. I think when you're writing about migration, I think it becomes personal when you don't live there anymore. So I think some of that.
But I mean, I'm always coming. Like I'm a yo-yo. I go, I come back, I try to leave, I'm back. This city is like a magnet. I'm always returning. But I think it was also thinking about ancestry, about migration paths. So some are sort of personal stories of where people in my family have come from, whether it's from Kutch or whether it's from Wales. But also it's impossible not to see the larger stories of movement happening around you and the desperation with which people are going and forced to flee, and those kind of patterns and the reasons why people move, and the fear around the outsider. And I mean, these are things I've been writing about for a long time, but it feels to be at a fever pitch now, and I think a lot of the poems here are thinking about the past, the present, and the future, childhood, ancestors, mine or others, borrowed, like how do you hold these different time zones in a way, and kind of bringing it together with these kind of images which are not meant to be narrative or storytelling, but simply to create a kind of a dream-like feeling of just movement of figure, an archetype, a feeling, nostalgia. That's how what you got, or whatever, a kind of
Conversations.
uncanny.
I feel like there are many conversations you had with people, and I feel like you processed those feelings, and at some point you wrote them. So I feel a lot of it here are conversations with people that you've met in your journey, and I know that it feels like they're in one place, but they're actually from Madras to the whole world. And so, do you want to share a little bit about all these different journeys, processes? Because not only do you have to have that conversation, you have to process it and then write it, and some of them are not easy conversations to have. And most of the things that I've seen you write, they're all about survival and hope, and it's not completely depressive.
No, I mean, I think there is something, about poetry that does skirt around despair, of course, always. But I think that mostly, mostly it's this thing of, oh, I'm alive. Oh, I'm still here. What does that mean? What does it mean to survive? What does it mean to be alive? And I think we are always figuring out our relationship of ourself to the world, to the environment around us, to other people, and that's a constantly shifting thing. I think the nice thing about poetry is that you may be drawing certain things from reality, but even the speaker, it's not I, me, Tishani. There's always a construct. There's always an imagination, whereby you get to shift things and do other things. So it's not simply reality. It's not simply reporting something. I think the thing that most art is trying to do is to shift reality, actually, and to work along some mode of, some kind of metamorphosis, some kind of transformation, some kind of movement, so that you enter something with one idea, but then after having watched a film or spent time with a painting or read something, you are shifted inside, and that is fed by so many things, So it's fed by, yes, conversations, travels, images, but then there's something that happens when you're actually writing, and that's a very magical, for me, experience. And in fact, I teach writing, but I actually don't believe that you should be trying to teach this, because it's something that you figure out. And so there's no code. Let's say there's no formula. There's no sense of, oh, I wrote one poem and now I know how to write poems. If I haven't written a poem, which I haven't in many weeks, then I am a beginner again. I have to find a first line. I don't know if I can do it. And I think that's probably for everything, for an artist, or like who's not painted, or who's not, like, you come back and you have to regroup and you have to go back. And I really actually love that, because I feel that there's a constant renewal of why you're doing the thing that you do. And also it allows you to change yourself.
Well, I would open this up a little bit more because I feel there are a lot of people who know Tishani here, and I think they might have a few questions. But before I move on to that, I was curious to know about all the different titles, okay? Because, like I said, I find this book like a little short story book because I can pick and choose anyone. And so I was just curious to know how have you come up with these titles? One of them, which is the one which has Elon Musk in it, which is the one that
It's Jeff Bezos.
Jeff Bezos.
I'm not
Yes.
written about Elon
yes,
Musk
yes.
yet.
One of the two, the both. I'm not going to say the
Jeff is what the title is. Jeff Bezos goes to space and becomes a bhakti poet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you read it for us?
Yes.
So this poem was written when they were all racing to be the first, and men with their big rockets. And I thought I should, and I happened to be reading Linda Hess's, writings on bhakti poetry, and I was really trying to say, like, wouldn't it be wonderful if Jeff Bezos discovered bhakti poetry? So you can be also, poems can be wishful thinking. They can't change the world, but you can make things happen in a poem that doesn't happen in real life. So this poem, Jeff Bezos goes to space and becomes a bhakti poet. We must believe Jeff bows down in all that darkness, that his transformation occurs the way a new star burns out of the cloudy egg that has sheltered it. For so long, they have been trying to tell him, journey within in order to slay your inner deer. The city of your body is your own green garden. Like all men who believe they have the right to go on forever, Jeff thought the word emperor came from Empyrean. He wanted to get there first. He had never experienced the discomfort of being a guest too long in someone's home. What Jeff saw, he beheld and owned. From above, he sees there will never be enough time. We can only survive by closing the gaps, these globs of dust around us, the whole cosmic past and inferno still simmering out there on the horizon. Waves rise through his body, and he gets it now. He really gets it. The body is as boundless as the universe. Every window inside him opens. Look how our planet gleams like the bud of a rare blue lotus. It's why bliss is always described as a kind of burning. We begin and end with fire. Jeff, listen if you can. It's not too late. We are aglow, and the future is coming for us.
Thank you. I would love to open this.
Oh, I'm going to answer your question about the
Yes,
titles.
yes.
Because I love titles. I love
You
titles.
should read some of them out because they are. You should read some of the ones
Well,
you really like.
There's some of them are quite long, and I think
Some of them are funny
they're
and
funny. There's a wonderful American poet called Billy Collins, and he talked once about titles being the kind of doormat to the house. I was talking about the house of the poem, and it's a way to kind of lead the reader in. So sometimes you want to put certain information in the poem, but it doesn't quite fit, and so the title can do this kind of work for you, So I have titles. Like one title is called Sonnet for the Dodo, written jet-lagged in Manchester as India and Pakistan threaten war. Another one is called Sonnet for Martha, the last passenger pigeon who died aged 29 at the Cincinnati Zoo. Another one is called Imagine everyone in the world was going through the same existential angst at the exact same time. Perimenopausal desire as fruit-sucking pink underwing moth. So you can do a lot with the title, and I think that the title has this kind of possibility to help contain the poem. And also, I like to change registers to have a sense of that wry like humor. And then if I need to go to wherever I need to go emotionally, I go. Yeah.
Personally, again, for me, I enjoyed reading all of it. I still have a bit to finish, but I think it's important in today's day and age, and I'll repeat this especially because we're in a digital age. It takes me a really long time to get my son to sit down and read a book. And I think it's very important that we have sessions like this, we have poetry, and in fact, just having this book allowed me to sit down, slow down, and read. So I think it's very important to continue having these moments where we continue doing book launches and sessions like this because I think it's reduced. And I would like to thank Ranveer especially for this because without you, I think something like this wouldn't exist in Chennai. And Prakriti for doing this again and again over the years. So thank you very much.
Yeah,
And
thank you, Ranveer.
I would open this up to the audience. Please feel free to ask Tishani any questions. Also, this book is available outside. If you're nice to Tishani, she might sign it for you. Would you like to pass the mic?
Questions? Anybody have a question? Ranveer.
I have a question in the way that you recite with a certain meter, and it's the way you've been reciting your poem. Can you share where that comes from and why it is that way? Because different people recite or share their poem in different ways, and
Yeah.
it's particular to you, the way you recite it.
Well, I think that the thing that I've noticed about when poets read, people say, oh, because you memorize or whatever, you're performing it. But I disagree. I think anybody who gets on a stage is performing. And so whether you're kind of whispering in the corner, you're still performing because you're there up with your work. But I think one thing about learning a poem, which we used to have to do in school, of course, and that kind of, whose woods these are, I think I know his house is in the village, though he will not, this kind of what is it about poetry that actually is spell making, is its meter, is its possibility for rhyme and for those tensions built into the language and the syllabics and the sonic effect. So personally, I think like if you're at a poetry reading, you might be able to catch maybe a line or two here and there or an image, but you're certainly not going to get the whole of the poem. So don't worry. You're like, what is she talking about? I think that's not the point. It's not a communication report. It's about language that's been worked in a very distilled, strong, potent form, which does work on the level of the ear and on the level of the eye on the page, but also on the level of the body. So the other thing I noticed with poets when they read, is that even if they are not movers or performers or any of that, they all move their toes slightly. They'll be going tadak, 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 tadak as they read because they have been working on their poems and their poems are in their bodies because they've spent. And so when they're reciting, it's like a kind of talam, I guess. It's like you have your own beat. And so when you read your poem, that's how you read it. And you might try to change it and stuff, but it's kind of coming through the body. And so for me, when I'm writing a poem, I'm usually walking up and down the beach like a crazy person, reciting it, saying it. And then that's the time of understanding like, okay, this doesn't fit, this doesn't work, I have to change something. Or the speaking aloud is when I understand what it is, because for me poetry is meant to be heard aloud, it is meant to be spoken, even though I'm very happy that a book exists and they are there on the page. That's a different relationship to language and words, which is more with the eye, but this is how you hear it. And so I think very much speaking it is a kind of unconscious natural meter of the body, just this is how these words seem to me. So yeah,
Thank you.
hope that makes sense.
Hi, this is Nagma. And so this is not about the book, but something that you said earlier, that you cannot teach writing to someone, because it is something that it has to be, you have to be born with it. Everybody has their own style. But being a writer or any kind of a performer, it is bearing your soul, bearing yourself, your thought, it's like unmasking yourself in front of so many people. Whether you say that you are inspired by whatever is happening around the world, or people you meet, but what you are writing or what you are performing is actually what you are feeling inside. So how do you bear yourself? And this is a closet writer asking, because I write a lot, but I just feel that, oh my God, I can never put it out in front of others. So I think what you could teach is, how do you bear? I mean, it's a very big thing that you're able to, bear yourself.
Okay, that's really good. Let me first say that I shouldn't say that you can't teach writing, because I am paid quite well to teach writing. So you can, absolutely.
Definitely.
Try to teach writing. What I'm saying is it is not mandatory. You don't need to go to, you can be a self-taught person. You need to read a lot. You need to practice like everything else. But
you can structure it. You can tell them how to structure the
yeah,
poems,
and I think James Baldwin has this beautiful quote about that about stamina. He says, "I know a lot of talented ruins," and so talent is like part of it. But if you don't have stamina or discipline, you're never going to finish a novel, for instance. So it's just you need to kind of have that dedication and discipline. There is a wonderful poet called Denise Riley, and she talks about something called lyric shame. And it's a really interesting concept, because she basically says that all writers and poets, there is an element of shame involved in the lyric form. Why do I feel the need to get up and say this, or to write it in a poem and do this? What is that? And why do we call it confessional? It's like confessional poetry. It's like there is an element of having to confess in that, sense of, in a Christian sense of the confession. But she speaks very beautifully about lyric shame, because basically she's saying that these two things come together, and the most of the writers I know are like what we would call shy exhibitionists or gregarious hermits. There's an element where you are deeply, deeply introverted and private and inner. You have to be very, very inner to write. But then there's an element of saying, hey, is anybody out there? Or is it just two people? Or is anyone going to listen to me? Or here I am. And so it's a strange thing that I think probably a lot of writers have to some degree or the other, whereby it's a mix of vulnerability, of course, and I think you have to be quite sensitive to be a writer, because you're absorbing things and responding to them. And so obviously you are also sensitive to then what other people say. But you also have to develop a kind of thick skin as you go. So that's what you teach, through a writing workshop or something. You kind of have to brace yourself for the brickbats and people, sort of saying, well, that's rubbish, or I hate that, and then you just think, well, you have to find your audience, and you have to, but you basically have to go through a real sense of being okay with that innerness coming out, because otherwise you're just working for yourself, which is fine, but then you're not a writer in the public realm. And it never goes away, that that tussle with the lyric shame. Yeah.
How do you see that relationship between your poems on the page, yourself performing the poems, the video piece, and the conversation and the interplay between all of that, which I found very fascinating. How did you really visualize all of this? I mean, I know she did ask you a question about that, but to me it's still not. I would like you to talk about that a little bit.
Well, so the poem comes first. The poem is its thing. It's its own entity. It doesn't need anything else. It exists just by having written it on the page. The reader has to read it. I don't need to be there to read the poem. And then there's this sort of other element, I guess, of thinking about, all of us poets, what we are. We are like, I think, some element of us are a bit evangelical, or trying to like say, hey, poetry changed my life and it can change your life too. Ranveer is like organizing poetry festivals, and it's like, go to a cafe and just bomb them with poetry, and people are like, I'm having a conversation, I don't want to listen to your poems. And just this insistence that poetry is important and it matters, and we kind of bring it out into different realms. And so I think in the beginning there was this sense of experimenting beyond the poem as its form, to just see like what are the possibilities. Primarily because I had been working in different forms. I had been working with Chandra, so dance and being on stage. So what do I want to do if I'm going to do that? And then it's just play. I think a lot of the times what I'm interested in, which I still feel that is important, is that you should be able to experiment and have fun playing with things. One of the things that I feel, which I love about writing as well, is it's just you. You need zero money and zero resources to write a poem. It's the cheapest, freest, most wonderful thing. Like, you can just write a poem without anything. But you can't make a film without anything. You can't make film without other people. And you just realize, oh my God, even for a little tiddly thing, it's so complicated. This person has to do, that person has to do. It's like different talent set. And what I like about it is a collaborative sense of, so even something like working on my own body, doing my choreographies, I can only work on myself because my life is that's how I am. I don't have a dance school. I don't have this background. But if I'm doing a film, I can say to my two friends, Akila and Amrita, come, let's play, let's have fun, let's do this. We'll have props. This is what I think. And then we get together and we have 3 days making something where you don't know where, it's like a poem. You don't know where it's going to go, but you kind of just, it's a kind of creative, experiment. And then at the end, you say, okay, I guess I was thinking, you have certain themes, you have certain ideas, you have certain images. So my only image for this is a kind of very World War II image of sort of those jerky figures of like of a woman running into the sea, and it just was this repetitive image with this Paganini music was in my head. And I just thought, okay, I'll start with that. And then I didn't want just one, and I didn't want two because that's duality. I wanted 3. And so that was the base. And then I think, well, now I have this image. What am I going to do with it? How am I going to interact with it? How am I going to have my cues? How am I going to move from one? So it's just kind of grew like that with an idea, and then trying to say, well, okay, I'll make a performance in the way that I did for, say, Girls Are Coming Out of the Woods, but with a different set of things. Because I feel like it's nice to just experiment. And I really am very interested in the visual vocabulary and what it can do with body and with language. I don't know, I hope that answered you, Srilata, a little bit. Yeah, okay.
Tishani, you've always, you started your life writing poetry, but you've also transitioned into novels.
Yeah.
But you always describe yourself as a poet. So how has that process been for you, between writing poetry and writing novels?
Yeah. So the thing is that I have sadly become what I call non-fiction uncle. And that is that last few years I've read very few novels. I've lost the joy of reading novels, and I feel that when I go to the novel, I don't get the kind of pleasure I got reading novels. And so I read a lot of nonfiction and a lot of memoir and a lot of poetry. I still read poetry and essays. I love the essay form. But I'm reading less and less fiction, which, I used to always derogatorily say nonfiction uncle, because it's like uncle only reads history books or war books or whatever. And I said, I don't want to be that person who's reading, like, it's very utilitarian, I'm going to get some knowledge, I'm going to learn something. I just want to read for joy. That was why I came to books in the first place. The imagination, to be transported, to be to not escapism, but just to be able to go into the atmosphere of a novel is such a beautiful thing. I never remember plots. I never remember what happened. It is the least exciting question for me. But I remember the atmosphere of reading certain novels, how I felt, and I just miss that, you know. And so I think there's a long way of saying that I don't know if I'll write a novel again because it was very difficult for me to write the two novels. I enjoyed it, but it takes this kind of commitment to that one thing, and I feel like at the moment everything feels very fragmented. My time is fragmented, my life is fragmented. I don't have this I think of like the years from say 26 to whatever mid 40s as being a lot of time on my hands, and now time is less. So you know, people do it. They get up at 5 in the morning and they write their 500 words and they keep going, and they have children and jobs and they still do it. Yeah, I don't know how to do it, but it's not me. So I think in other words that the poems are the primary impulse for me. The scale of the poem, the time of the poem, the world of the poem is very holdable and graspable for me, and the novel feels very ambitious and very like I have to be ready to get into it. I hope I do, because I hope I also find my way back to fiction, even if it's not me writing it, but to enjoy reading it. Because I feel that we need novels more than ever now in this time that we are living in. That we don't want to just be into that useful, productive reading for knowledge. That we need the imagination is the most important thing we have, and we're outsourcing that every second day, you know, every second minute. So we kind of need to reinforce imagination, and the novel is a great form. So hopefully find my way back. Yeah. Thanks.
Any other questions?
Hi Tish, can you tell us about the title?
Oh yeah, yes, it's a strange title. So I think the feeling for me was that this was a poem that I was very happy with, the Egrets Wild War, because it held together the two things that were main themes of the book, I would say. One is the idea of living in a time of war, which we have been for the last 3 years. And the other is the sense of not just the egrets, but all the birds, the kind of the role of the natural world, the idea of wonder, of joy, of beauty, good stuff on the one side, separated by the comma, and then the heaviness of the war, which is still ongoing. And so I think, yeah, that sense of the wild war is also the ongoingness, because it feels to me that we have been forced to participate, watch, listen in horror as things keep happening. And yet we also have to get on with our day, you know. We have to make our coffee, the dog needs to be taken for a walk, you need to file it, whatever, you know. Life goes on. And so this dissonance of daily life, yet with this kind of somewhat last days apocalyptic feeling of climate change and wars and, you know, all this 24/7 bombardment through our phones. So how to kind of hold those two things? And so I think the title, the comma, is the very important thing, because it's the hinge between this and that. And then I've always thought that every kind of poem in a way is a negotiation, you know. It's like I want to write about happiness, and then suddenly I'm writing about something really depressing. And I want to write about joy and wonder and the flash of the kingfisher's wing, but then something else is coming up because I saw this, you know. So I think the wild war is, you know, started to hold all the poems in the collection. So that's how it became the title. But yeah, thank you for that.
So before we finish the evening, a big thanks to both of you.
Tishani, you've always you started your life writing poetry, but you've also transitioned into novels.
Yeah.
But you always describe yourself as a poet. So how has that process been for you? You know, between writing poetry and writing novels.
So the thing is that I have sadly become what I call non-fiction uncle, and that is that last few years I've read very few novels. I've lost the joy of reading novels, and I feel that when I go to the novel, I don't get the kind of pleasure I got reading novels. And so I read a lot of nonfiction and a lot of memoir and a lot of poetry. I still read poetry and essays. I love the essay form. But I'm reading less and less fiction, which, you know, I used to always derogatorily say nonfiction uncle because it's like uncle only reads history books or war books or whatever. You know, and I said, I don't want to be that person who's reading, like it's very utilitarian, you know. I'm going to get some knowledge. I'm going to learn something. I just want to read for joy. That was why I came to books in the first place. The imagination, to be transported, to be, to not escapism, but just to be able to go into the atmosphere of a novel is such a beautiful thing. I never remember plots. I never remember what happened. It is the least exciting question for me. But I remember the atmosphere of reading certain novels, how I felt, and I just miss that, you know. And so I think there's a long way of saying that I don't know if I'll write a novel again, because it was very difficult for me to write the two novels. I enjoyed it, but it takes this kind of commitment to that one thing, and I feel like at the moment everything feels very fragmented. My time is fragmented, my life is fragmented. I don't have this I think of like the years from say 26 to whatever mid 40s as being a lot of time on my hands, and now time is less. So, you know, people do it. They get up at 5 in the morning and they write their 500 words and they keep going, and they have children and jobs and they still do it. Yeah, I don't know how to do it, but it's not me. So I think in other words that the poems are the primary impulse for me. The scale of the poem, the time of the poem, the world of the poem is very holdable and graspable for me, and the novel feels very ambitious and very like I have to be ready to get into it. I hope I do, because I hope I also find my way back to fiction, even if it's not me writing it, but to enjoy reading it. Because I feel that we need novels more than ever now, in this time that we are living in, that we don't want to just be into that useful, productive reading for knowledge, that we need, the imagination is the most important thing we have, and we're outsourcing that every second day, you know, every second minute. So we kind of need to reinforce imagination, and the novel is a great form. So hopefully find my way back. Yeah. Thanks.
Any other questions?
Hi Tish, can you tell us about the title?
Oh yeah, yes, it's a strange title. So I think the feeling for me was that this was a poem that I was very happy with, the Egrets Wild War, because it held together the two things that were main themes of the book, I would say. One is the idea of living in a time of war, which we have been for the last 3 years. And the other is the sense of not just the egrets, but all the birds, the kind of the role of the natural world, the idea of wonder, of joy, of beauty, good stuff on the one side, separated by the comma, and then the heaviness of the war, which is still ongoing. And so I think, yeah, that sense of the wild war is also the ongoingness, because it feels to me that we have been forced to participate, watch, listen in horror as things keep happening. And yet we also have to get on with our day, you know. We have to make our coffee, the dog needs to be taken for a walk, you need to file it, whatever, you know, life goes on. And so this dissonance of daily life, yet with this kind of somewhat last days apocalyptic feeling of climate change and wars and, you know, all this 24/7 bombardment through our phones. So how to kind of hold those two things. And so I think the title, the comma is the very important thing because it's the hinge between this and that. And then I've always thought that every kind of poem in a way is a negotiation, you know. It's like I want to write about happiness and then suddenly I'm writing about something really depressing. And I want to write about joy and wonder and the flash of the kingfisher's wing, but then something else is coming up because I saw this, you know. So I think the while war is, you know, started to hold all the poems in the collection. So that's how it became the title. But yeah, thank you for that.
So, before we finish the evening, a big thanks to both of you and read by you.
Okay, I'll read. This is called Childhood as Studio Scene. Part 1. Rajnikant superstar visits our upstairs neighbors who are film producers. Light falls around us like a darkroom miracle, casting no shadows, and the day with its nerve endings is frenzied and alive. It is 1978 in Madras, and I am 3. On the front seat of his Fiat, that's Rajnikant, yeah. On the front seat of his Fiat lies a pack of gold flakes. The flame tree by the gate sheds flowers like matches alight, and he, the king, superstars, who sends villains spiraling and catches cigarettes mid-flight, is suddenly here, swaggers over ordinarily, bends, kisses my cheek. Thank you. Thank you so much.